I arrived at the church about 15 minutes early, expecting to see at least a few familiar faces. But as I stepped inside, an immediate sense of unease settled over me. The place was nearly empty, only a few scattered attendees, all strangers. No grieving family, no close friends. Just a handful of people sitting quietly in the dimly lit pews. I hesitated, glancing around for someone I recognized, but there was no one. My chest tightened as I walked further in, scanning the room for a casket, a framed photo. Anything that would indicate a funeral was actually taking place. There was nothing. A man in a dark suit, who I assumed was the funeral director, approached me with a polite but unreadable expression. "You're here for the service?" he asked. I nodded, suddenly feeling unsure of myself. "Everything is in order," he assured me before I could even ask anything. His tone was neutral, rehearsed, like he had said those words 1,000 times before. But how could everything be in order if there wasn't even a body? The lack of a casket alone sent a shiver through me. I wanted to ask him about it, but something in his demeanor made me hold back. I took a seat near the back, my hands clasped tightly together. The air felt thick, almost oppressive, like the church itself was pressing down on me. The few other attendees remained silent, their heads slightly bowed. No one acknowledged me or each other. I was struck by how unnatural it all felt. Funerals, even the most tragic ones, had a rhythm to them. Grief had a sound, a presence. This was something else entirely. A small stack of funeral programs rested on a table near the entrance. I reached for one, my fingers hesitating before picking it up. The cover was plain, just my friend's name printed in an elegant, almost old-fashioned script. No dates, no images. Just the name. When I flipped it open, my stomach twisted. There was no obituary, no mention of family, no recounting of their life. Instead, the text was cryptic. A soul lost, yet never truly gone. A legacy that remains unseen, waiting to be uncovered. What the hell did that mean? I looked up, half expecting someone else to be reacting the same way. But no one else seemed bothered by it. They sat there, still and quiet, like they had all accepted whatever this was supposed to be. My hands were clammy as I placed the program back down, resisting the urge to just get up and leave. Maybe I had misunderstood something. Maybe the Real service was happening somewhere else. But if that was the case, why was I invited here? The church doors creaked softly, and I turned, hoping to see a familiar face arriving late. Instead, it was just the funeral director, now standing near the entrance, watching the room with an unreadable gaze. His presence felt wrong, like he wasn't just overseeing things, but observing us, assessing. The service began without warning. No music, no announcement, just the funeral director stepping forward and beginning to speak in a slow, deliberate tone. His words were vague, mentioning loss, remembrance, and something about carrying forth an unseen duty. He never said my friend's name. Not once. My skin prickled as I realized no one else seemed to find this strange. A low humming sound filled the air. At first, I thought it was coming from the church speakers, but it didn't have a clear source. It was everywhere, vibrating in my chest. The lights flickered once. The hum grew louder. I gripped the edge of the pew, my heartbeat thudding in my ears. Something wasn't right. Something was very, very wrong. I forced myself to focus on the words being spoken, but they slipped through my mind like water. It wasn't just the content, it was the way they were said. Flat, hollow, like they were being recited by someone who didn't understand them. My grip tightened on my knees as I tried to recall the last time I had seen my friend alive. The memory was there, but fuzzy. As if the more I reached for it, the less I could hold on to it. The humming sound deepened, taking on an almost melodic quality. I turned my head slightly, watching the other attendees. No one else reacted. They remained perfectly still, their expressions blank, their hands resting limply on their laps. I wanted to whisper to the person closest to me, to ask if they were hearing it too, but my throat felt tight, like speaking would be breaking some unspoken rule. I glanced down at the program again, my pulse pounding. Maybe I had missed something. But no, the words were the same, and the more I stared at them, the stranger they felt. A legacy that remains unseen. What kind of legacy? My friend wasn't famous. They weren't involved in anything that should be this secretive. Were they? A cold draft passed through the church, though I saw no open windows, no movement from the doors. The candles at the altar flickered violently, though there was no breeze. A soft scraping sound echoed from somewhere above me, like something shifting along the rafters. I swallowed hard, resisting the urge to look up. The funeral director's voice faltered for the first time. A flicker of hesitation crossed his face, barely noticeable, but enough to make my stomach drop. He cleared his throat and continued, but something had changed. The hum had grown into a droning, vibrating tone, pressing into my skull. The lights flickered again. Then, the church doors slammed shut on their own. I jumped, my breath catching in my throat. A murmur finally rippled through the room, the first sign that anyone else was aware of what was happening. The funeral director's expression darkened, like the closing of the doors was wrong. Like it wasn't supposed to happen. A sharp whisper cut through the silence. I didn't see who said it, or even if it came from a person at all. But I heard it clear as day. You shouldn't be here. I felt a sharp, instinctive need to get up and leave. Every part of my body screamed at me to move, but I stayed frozen in my seat, my breath coming in shallow bursts. The funeral director had stopped speaking. He just stood there, staring at the closed church doors with an expression I couldn't read. No one moved. No one reacted. It was as if time itself had stalled for a moment, like the entire room was holding its breath. I gripped the funeral program so tightly that the paper crumpled in my hands. My mind raced, trying to piece together why everything felt so wrong. My friend was dead. Weren't they? I remembered getting the news, the shock, the grief that hit me like a freight train. But as I sat there, something about that memory started to unravel. The details, where it happened, how it happened, suddenly felt blurred, like a dream I had convinced myself was real. The humming sound hadn't stopped. If anything, it was growing, vibrating in my chest like a second heartbeat. It was no longer just a sound. It was a presence, something that felt aware of us. The lights dimmed, the church's stained glass windows darkening like the sky outside had been swallowed whole. My skin crawled. I wasn't imagining this. Something was happening. Then the pews creaked. Not from someone shifting in their seat, but like something unseen was moving through them. A slow, deliberate sound, growing closer. I forced myself to turn my head slightly, scanning the room. The other attendees were still eerily still, their faces slack, their eyes unfocused. It hit me then, no one had cried. No one had expressed a single shred of grief. It was as if they were just placeholders. My hands were ice cold. This wasn't a funeral. This was something else. And I had no idea what I had walked into. Swallowing hard, I forced myself to look at the funeral director again. His face had changed. He looked tense, like he had lost control of something he thought he could contain. His gaze flicked toward me, just for a second, but in that brief moment, I saw something like recognition. Like I was the thing that didn't belong here. Then the lights cut out completely. A gasp, mine, maybe someone else's, echoed through the pitch-black church. The hum became a deep, guttural vibration, rattling the wooden pews. I scrambled to my feet, my pulse hammering, every nerve in my body on fire. My breathing sounded deafening in the silence that followed. And then, from somewhere in the darkness, I heard a voice I hadn't heard in weeks. A voice I knew. You weren't supposed to come. My entire body locked up. It was their voice. My friend's voice. I wanted to believe I had imagined it, that my own mind was playing tricks on me, but the weight of it, the sheer reality of it, crushed that hope instantly. I tried to speak, tried to call out, but no sound left my throat. A flicker of light. The candles near the altar sputtered weakly back to life, casting long, distorted shadows across the walls. My hands were trembling as I turned toward the source of the voice. I didn't want to look. Every instinct screamed at me not to. But I did. At first I saw nothing. Just the empty space between the pews, the flickering candlelight making the darkness beyond seem deeper, almost endless. Then movement, slow, deliberate. A figure stepped forward, just enough for the light to catch its shape. My stomach turned to ice. It looked like my friend, but something was wrong. Their face was off. Not deformed, not grotesque, just wrong. The way their features sat, the way their skin seemed slightly too tight, as if they were wearing a mask of themselves. And their eyes, God, their eyes. Dark, hollow, too deep. Like looking into something that shouldn't exist. You weren't supposed to come, they said again, their voice eerily calm. It was my friend's voice, but flatter. Detached. Like they were repeating words rather than speaking them. The funeral director stepped forward abruptly, placing himself between me and it. His expression had completely changed, no longer neutral, no longer in control. He looked angry. No, he looked scared. Leave, he hissed, but I couldn't tell if he was talking to me or to them. The humming sound swelled again, growing sharp, vibrating deep in my skull. The other attendees, if they were even real, remained motionless, their heads still bowed, as if they hadn't noticed anything happening. Or maybe they weren't allowed to notice. My legs felt like they were made of stone, but I forced myself to step back. My voice cracked. I didn't even know what I was trying to say. Ask what was happening. Ask if this was real. Demand answers that I was sure no one here was going to give me. The air in the church had changed, thick with something I couldn't explain. It felt like I was standing on the edge of something vast, something that wanted to pull me in. Then my friend, or whatever that thing was, tilted their head, almost curiously. "It's not safe for you here," they said. Their lips moved, but the voice didn't match. It was delayed, like an echo chasing too close behind the original sound. Something shifted behind them. A shape. A shadow that wasn't cast by any light. My breath caught. It was watching. That was it. That was the moment my body finally listened to my instincts. I turned and ran. I expected the funeral director to stop me, but he didn't. In fact, I swear I heard him mutter "good" under his breath as I bolted past him. The church doors, which had slammed shut earlier, were somehow unlocked now. I shoved them open and stumbled outside into the cold night air, my heart nearly exploding in my chest. I didn't stop running until I was several blocks away. When I finally dared to look back, the church was still there, silent, dark, as if nothing had happened inside. No one followed me. No one came out. But the humming? I could still hear it, buzzing faintly at the back of my mind. I don't know what I walked into that night. I don't know if my friend is really dead, or if they were ever the person I thought they were. I don't know what that thing was pretending to be them, or what the funeral director was trying to control. All I know is that I was never supposed to be there, and whatever was inside that church knows I was. I still dream about the humming, and sometimes when the night is too quiet, I swear I can hear it again.